Hi and welcome to Lab. This week we're on to exercise 16 and 17. Holy cow, the semester's almost over. So it's the spinal cord and spinal nerves lab with the lab report that, of course, as always, is linked to on the lab page itself. So if you click there, it should look like this. There is your lab guide, which will look like this, only yours will be a PDF. This is a Word document so that I may edit it. What was next? These additional images I will go over in a few minutes. Those are some PowerPoints that I put together because I didn't like the images that are available from the OpenStax book. So I just borrowed some. Don't tell anyone. And then your lab report is down here. I will point out I added this, whatever you want to call that, learning objective right there, which is not on your, specifically listed on your lab guides, but it is something that you need to know is to be able to identify the spinal nerves. So what we're going to do is start with the lab guide. I am going to start small, zoom in on the spinal cord, and then go bigger and end with the spinal nerves. So we will go here and past all that. So first we just want to, of course, as always, remember this is what you need to know. And what I'm going to do is quickly run you through the diagram, and then I'll come back and write some stuff on this so that you know what you need to know. So first things first, I like this picture of the, whatever that thing is called, spinal cord. Just to understand the way it works, we're going to talk about how a reflex might work, even though we're getting ahead of ourselves, or just how sensation might work. That almost looks like a hand, right? So just imagine that that thing right there is a thumb. And then you whack that thumb with a hammer. Not fun, I know. So there is going to be a sensory neuron out here in the thumb, whose axon is going to run up into this nerve, through there, and then into here, right there. And then we want to remember that its cell body is located here. And I'm just going to mark from here to here. This is what we're calling the mixed nerve. And then you're going to have ventral roots and dorsal roots. So these would be ventral roots here and dorsal roots there. So the sensory neuron runs through the mixed spinal nerve into the dorsal root ganglion, because remember, a collection of cell bodies outside the central nervous system is called a ganglion, and the ganglion in your dorsal root is called the dorsal root ganglion. So it is going to dump some neurotransmitter onto, in this case, I'm just going to draw a little interneuron. But you could also imagine that maybe the same interneuron has a collateral, so the axon splits and it's also sending sensory information up the spine, or excuse me, up the spinal cord to the thalamus. But for now, we're just going to look at what's going on in the spinal cord here. So there's a cell body here, there's going to be another cell body there. That's why this is all called gray matter. I forgot to point that out. So dorsal horn of gray matter, lateral horn, and ventral horn, always cell bodies. For the dorsal horn, it's the cell bodies of interneurons and neurons that are part of the sensory pathway going up the spine, spinal cord. And then these axons are all traveling up in the white matter. And you don't have to know the funiculi, just know all of this stuff outside of the gray matter is the white matter. Getting back to our fun reflex, because getting hit with a hammer is fun. Then in the dorsal horn, there will be the cell body of a motor neuron whose axon is going to go out the ventral root, and then it's going to dump neurotransmitter onto a muscle here. That's supposed to be a muscle that's going to contract. And your hand is going to pull away because you hit the hammer with it. So you'll notice then, looking at this, that dorsal horn you want to think of as sensory neurons. Lateral horn we haven't talked about. Ventral horn is motor neurons. And this right here is why this part from there to there is called a mixed nerve, because it contains both sensory and motor fibers, whereas the two roots are either sensory or motor. This lateral horn is part of your autonomic nervous system, and we'll go over that. Then we have to talk about the meninges, which is these three layers of sort of connective tissue type stuff: Dura Mater, Arachnoid Matter, and Pia Mater. This image doesn't do a good job of explaining them, nor does this one, but we're going to use it anyways because it's what we have. So the part of it that is accurate is the dura, which would be this, what are they calling? Oh, it's the black layer on the outside. And then lining the inside of the dura is the arachnoid matter. What is inaccurate is this part in here. So if you look here, you've got this red layer, which is the pia. You can assume then that the black just represents the outside of the white matter, or the outside of these roots and the white matter of the spinal cord, because there isn't another layer of tissue there. It's just the nervous tissue. So the pia is directly glued to the spinal cord and the ventral roots here. What's inaccurate is the arachnoid matter. So this stuff actually kind of fills up this whole space in here, and it kind of looks like cobwebs. You know how like a cobweb, if you leave a corner of a room unvacuumed for long enough, the cobwebs can fill in the whole corner? That's the way the arachnoid matter works, where it actually runs through this whole space, kind of like a big spider web. So if this were accurate, there would be a layer of arachnoid matter also over the pia, which would then double back and also line the inside of the dura mater. So again, if you were to dissect a spinal cord, you would remove the dura, and then after you got through the dura and you peeled away the arachnoid matter, you would see part of it was still stuck to the surface of the spinal cord. And that's where the blood vessels are, and then the blood vessels peel away when you peel away the dura mater, because they're on top of the pia, which is glued directly to the nervous tissue. I don't have a great image in the lab guide or in Practice Anatomy Lab to show you this, but I think with the explanation and the model that we have that shows the meninges, it should be obvious enough what is what. So those are the meninges. I forget whether you need to know all of them or not. I would just know all of them. I think Pia is not on your list. Right? Arachnoid and Dura Mater, because the Pia doesn't show up well in any of the models. That makes it even easier, though. If you're not pointing directly at the surface of the spinal cord, then it's not Pia Mater, so it's either Arachnoid or Dura. Let me see. What we didn't talk about is the central canal, and missed that. So right there in the middle is a little pinprick size hole. That's your central canal. You'll recall that your whole central nervous system starts out as a neural tube, and your spinal cord is like a tube with a really, really thick wall and a very small hole in the middle. That's your central canal, and that is continuous with the fourth ventricle of your brain. So if you went all the way up that, you'd go through the brain stem and you'd end up in the fourth ventricle, and then you could go all the way up into the third ventricle. So your whole, the remnants of the inside of your neural tube is still all connected. Your ventricles are connected to your central canal. So then just to review what we want to know, looking at this, posterior horn, we just want to say is sensory. That's where the sensory neurons go in, and we won't talk about interneurons, but that's where the cell bodies of other neurons in the sensory pathway would be residing, and then they would run up the spinal cord into the brain or brain stem. Anterior horn, then you want to know, is for motor neurons, right? This is all gray matter. Lateral horn is also motor. That's supposed to be an O, not an A. But I was thinking of saying autonomic, so I wrote an A. Autonomic. I can't write and spell at the same time, or talk and spell at the same time. So the lateral horn is where the motor neurons or the motor output for your autonomic nervous system reside. We're not going to worry about the central canal function-wise. We just want to know what it is. This is where the cell bodies of your sensory neurons are located. So sensory neurons, soma. Again, dorsal and ventral, just know dorsal is sensory, ventral is motor. Mixed simply means mixed, so that's sensory and motor. White matter be able to identify, arachnoid be able to identify, and dura be able to identify. So pretty straightforward there. Then, looking at the spinal cord, the first thing you want to be able to identify are the plexi, and I want you to understand what a plexus is, and then you need to know which nerves come off of which plexus. So if we just look at this real quick, let me get a color, blue will do. Well, let's just assume that there's a nerve that resides, right? The cell body is going to be somewhere in the spinal cord. It's going to come out here, and maybe it'll go this way and come out and be part of the lateral femoral cutaneous nerve. And then maybe somewhere even lower down on the spinal cord. Whoops, let me get a different color. Red. Hey, can I make purple if I put them over each other? No, it just writes over it. Doesn't mix like paint. So then this neuron goes in, but maybe it goes this way, and it comes out here. So all you want to notice is that what happens in the plexi is that many nerves merge together and then sprout out the other side. So if you look here, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different, I can't speak today, lumbar vertebrae or spinal nerves that then merge into fewer bigger nerves. And the plexi exist in places where lots of nerve fibers have to pass through a narrow part of the body. So they merge to form a few very thick trunks, or I forget what they're called now. It doesn't matter. Trunks, we'll call them trunks, even though I know that's wrong. Cords, they're called cords. And then those cords split into smaller and smaller nerves. The point I was trying to make is that neurons do not end or begin in the plexi. They just merge and then separate, like two highways might run together for a half mile and then split again. Same thing here. Yeah, this one does a better job of showing what I was trying to talk about. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different spinal nerves that ultimately get condensed down into 1, 2, 3 different chords. So right, these are all going to merge, and then those two are going to merge, and that just is a more efficient way to get all of the neurons through a narrow part of the body. This would be in your shoulder going out to your arm. We do have a good picture for, oh, I forgot. Spinal cord. This is what it looks like. It is really easy to identify. There should be a histology slide of spinal cord in practice anatomy lab. You can look at that. But this should be really easy. I will say on our exam, this lighter colored stuff here, that's the gray matter. It's going to be a little bit bigger and more pronounced like it is there. But otherwise, it's pretty much the same. This is the picture I wanted. So again, the first thing you want to be able to do is identify the plexi. So if on the lab exam we're pointing to a specific thing with a piece of tape, pointing at one thing, then we're asking for the nerve. If you see brackets like there are here, then we're asking for a plexus. We're asking for that group of nerves that all merge and form this tangle here. So if there's a bracket of nerves in the neck, it's the cervical plexus. If there's a bracket of nerves leading out to the shoulder, but still kind of coming from the cervical region, that's the brachial plexus. If we bracket a bunch of nerves above the sacrum, then that's your lumbar plexus. And if we bracket a bunch of nerves down by the sacrum, right there, then that is your sacral plexus. So be able to identify the 4 plexi and know which nerves come from which plexi. Then looking at what you would need to identify, let's go back here. You want to be able to identify the cervical plexus. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the lab report, not the lab. Go back here. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Dragging the bar is faster, but then I go past it. So you want to be able to identify the cervical plexus, but you're not going to identify the phrenic nerve because it doesn't show up on our model. But you still want to know that it comes from the cervical plexus because we might ask you a question about, which of the following nerves comes from the cervical plexus, or from which plexus is the phrenic nerve derived, something like that. Brachial plexus you can identify. All 5 of these nerves are visible on the model. We have lumbar plexus, there's just 2 nerves, that's not bad. And then the sacral plexus, I crossed this one off on the file I posted, and I forgot to cross that one off. But cross off tibial nerve too. The model that we have is just not, it doesn't represent the neurons the same way our images from our old book did, and so I just never taught those because there was no way to figure out what was supposed to be what. And if students can't make sense of the model using the book, like if they just have to rely on the key and trust that the key is what it says it is, I don't like that. I like the model to match something that they can take home and study. So forget about the tibial nerve. So that makes it easier. There's just 3 nerves in the leg to know. So then, this is where I have given you additional images because the images in our free book are not very good. So because we're still giving money to Pearson for practice anatomy lab and all of that, I'm using their images. So you can download this file from Dropbox. I have it open already. And most importantly, what it shows, what you really want, is the nerves that come from each plexus. And remember, you're not worried about identifying the nerves that come from the cervical plexus, so we don't really worry about identifying the phrenic nerve. Just if you see the cervical plexus, say it's the cervical plexus. So you can, on our model, see all of these. There's 5 nerves, and it seems intimidating at first, but 3 of them are really easy because you can find them down in the forearm. That's where they're going to be labeled. The one in the middle is the median nerve. The lateral one, which is close to the radius, is the radial nerve, and the most medial of the three, meaning closest to your body, not in between the two. Right next to your ulna is your ulnar nerve. So radial, median, and ulnar should be relatively easy. Then you just need to know that the one kind of that ends before you get to the forearm out here on the side is your musculocutaneous. And then this one that's actually in the acromial region is called the axial nerve because it sprouts off of this green cord here in the axial region. So that's why it's called the axial nerve. So the arm is the most complicated body part that you're going to have to know the neurons on, and it's really not that bad if you remember radial, median, and ulnar. Then what I don't have pictures of is all of the nerves from both the lumbar and sacral plexus in the same leg. So you're going to have to imagine this, or maybe just do some Google image searches for nervous system plaque or nervous system labeled, that sort of thing. That might be a good idea, just saying. So this is the lumbar plexus. You only need to identify two of these nerves. The one that goes down toward the femur is the femoral nerve, and then the one on your inner thigh is obturator, and it goes right through the obturator foramen. So that you might remember from when we did the appendicular skeleton. So if you not appendicular, sorry, axial. No, it's appendicular. If you just remember that the obturator is on your inner thigh, and then femoral can be confused with sciatic because they're both in the same region, but femoral runs on the front of your pelvis, and you can trace it back to the lumbar region. The only nerve that you're going to have to identify from the sacral plexus is the sciatic. That runs, as you can see here, behind the pelvic girdle. So if you see it going behind the pelvic girdle, it can't be femoral. Plus, you can trace it back to the sacral plexus. So that makes it pretty easy. If it goes all the way down the leg, but you can trace it back to the sacral plexus, it's sciatic. If it goes way down the leg, but you can trace it back to the lumbar plexus, it's femoral, or one of the branches off the femoral. We're going to label it up here. And then if it's in the inner thigh, it's obturator. So it's really not that bad. Wrong. For the reflexes, all we're going to do is a reflex arc. And all we want to be able to do is label the neurons in a reflex arc. So we're not going to worry about extensor versus flexor reflexes, or the photopupillary reflex, or the patellar reflex, because we just don't have time, and it's kind of boring to do online. So then, this figure is the one that you want to familiarize yourself with. So you have a noxious stimulus out here somewhere that is going to set off this blue sensory neuron. Then, just make it a little bigger, right? The blue sensory neuron is going to excite or stimulate that interneuron, which is then going to stimulate the motor neuron, which will then stimulate, in this case it should be the bicep, right? This should be on the front of the arm so that you contract the bicep, flex your elbow or flex your forearm, and pull your hand away from the noxious stimulus. So that would be a flexor reflex because you're flexing in response to it. So yeah, just be able to, if you see a model that diagrams this same reflex arc, be able to label, the sensory neuron, the interneuron, and the motor neuron. Piece of cake. Then, what do you have to do? We're playing with clay again, because we love clay. I made you buy it, you may as well use it. Where did that go? Is that here? There we go. So if you click here, it should look like that. Here's your lab report, which should look like this. And it tells you to just model the cranial nerves whoops, I left that on there. That's not supposed to be on there, but whatever. It tells you to model the spinal nerves, not cranial nerves, from clay. Don't worry about modeling the plexus accurately. And what I recommend you do is what I did, just to make it easier. Don't try and do it on your skeleton because that's a pain in the butt. Here I just drew an arm. I didn't even put the bones in. In yellow is the one cord that gives rise to the axillary nerve, and then the radial, and then these other three are musculocutaneous, median, and ulnar. So you're going to need to do three. Three plexi, but really just an arm and a leg. So these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nerves in the arm, and then 3 nerves in the leg going back to the proper part of the plexus. So maybe draw a sacrum so we can see sacral plexus versus lumbar plexus. And then you want to do the reflex arc in clay as well. Maybe yours will look a little nicer than this one. I did mine real quick earlier today because I actually turned Thanksgiving into a vacation when I should have been working. But so ouch, here's a stimulus. That excites your sensory neuron, which goes into the spinal cord and activates the inner neuron, which is going to activate the motor neuron, which is then going to activate the bicep so that you retract your arm from the noxious stimulus. And it's just that simple. So you'll need 3 pictures, your arm, your leg, and your reflex arc. And that's it. I think that's everything that we want to know. Pretty straightforward, not really as much information as last week. I should show you real quick what's in Practice Anatomy Lab. So if you go to, I don't know if you can see up here, anatomical models, nervous system, central nervous system, they have a good spinal cord, and pretty much everything that's on your list is labeled here, the roots, the horns, and the nerves. This one I like because they showed the meninges. So here on the outside is your Dura Mater, and then here on the inside is your Pia Mater, and then they have the Arachnoid Matter right there, filling up this entire space in between the Dura and the Pia. Technically this should be filled up too, this section in here and that section there. But I do like the way they represent the Arachnoid Matter because again, it runs through all of that highlighted blue region like cobwebs in a corner. Let me see, this is, they do have the, what do you call it? Spinal cord for central nervous system, but it is not that helpful. If you go to peripheral nervous system, they show the spinal cord again, or a spinal column, as well as the spinal cord, and now here they show the plexi, but they don't show all of the nerves on this model. When it comes to the nerves, they use these other models here. And we're not going to use these models. We're going to use a model that looks more like this one, only with the whole body and not a lot of anatomical detail. It's basically just kind of like my drawings, arms and legs and a nervous system, so that it's easy to see all of the nerves. And there's bones too out in the arms and legs, so you can see where things run. But that's what's there for you in Practice Anatomy Lab. It's really just the spinal cord cross-section that it comes in handy for. And I think that's it. Good luck with lab this week.